Hello everyone, this is Sally Elcordy again. I am interviewing Reverend Kevin Annett from Canada, who is speaking to you about the genocide of the Native Canadian children. I wanted to ask you, Reverend Annett, how did Agenda 21 play into this situation?
Well, Agenda 21, from my understanding and from what I've seen on the ground over many years, is a code phrase. And it's a code phrase for genocide, aimed specifically at Indigenous people and people who are still on the land. The term was first developed at a UN conference as far back as the 1970s, and it's tied up with this code phrase, sustainable development. Now, one clue to how this played out in the Native world in Canada is a Native man who I work with was a maintenance fellow on the Musqueam Indian Reservation in Vancouver. And in the garbage, he found minutes from a meeting of what's called the Assembly of First Nations. Now, this is groups of chiefs that are government funded. They're set up by the government to basically be an arm of the state. And these are chiefs who basically do the whim of the government and the churches. For example, they've never supported the investigation into the missing children. They support the apology and the money system that's been given to survivors. They're right in the government's pocket. And these are high-paid chiefs who are operating in that way, against the wishes of a lot of the Native people themselves. Now, in the garbage, he found minutes that we've gone through, and it kept referring to Agenda 21 as applied to Indian reservations. Now, what this is they worked out a deal, and this woman, Wendy Grant, was the chief who was saying these things. She works both for the government and the Assembly of First Nations. Wendy Grant was saying 3 years ago at this meeting that sustainable development on Indian reservations in Canada means people have to be forced off the reservation. They want to have the same amount of money but fewer heads so that they can keep more money. That's how they profit. But also it's a way to clear the traditional native lands of their people. And where do these people end up? They're forced off reservation, they live on the street, they're prey to drug dealers, to poverty, to disease. It's a way to exterminate the in her phrase, she actually said we have to decrease the number of mouths we're feeding on the reservation. So in other words, this fits in really well with the agenda of multinationals and the government, because it's a way of exterminating Native people who in Canada sit on very valuable resources. There's more oil in the tar sands in Alberta than there is in Saudi Arabia. Native groups have been declared terrorist organizations by the US and Canadian government. Frankly, you know, to get Native people off the land, to target them for extermination is going to help multinationals, going to help the government and their compliant Native chiefs. So when you hear these terms, Agenda 21, sustainable development, that's really a code phrase these days for the old agenda that's been going on for centuries, and that is, you know, forcing Natives off the land to get the resources and to wipe them out. To wipe out, they want to depopulate. As a matter of fact, one of the figures that was thrown out is there's now about 1.5 to 2 million Native people in Canada. Agenda 21, according to Wendy Grant and her group, they want to get that 1.5 million people down to about 50 to 100,000. That's their aim, to depopulate the Native community. And when you look at the use of vaccinations, under the Indian Act, Native people are not allowed to refuse medical treatment or vaccinations. So for example, when the swine flu scam broke out, the one area of the country that was declared a pandemic zone first was the Ahousaht Indian Reservation on the west coast of Vancouver Island, a very isolated area. Why would a pandemic break out there? Well, it's because I was getting phone calls from people on the Ahousaht Indian Reservation saying that public health nurses were coming in and forcing Tamiflu drug and other experimental vaccines onto the Native children in that community without the consent of the parents. They were just forcing vaccinations onto them. And so clearly, you know, this is, you know, the Canadian government also made a statement at the time that they were sending out increasing number of body bags to the reservations. All of these things are a clear statement to people that we want to wipe you out. And it's done in a very, in the language of public health concerns. And again, at the political level, talking about Agenda 21 and sustainable development. But to sustain the Native community, they have to depopulate it. That's the mentality. And, you know, that's so far been our experience. But because the evidence is, it's not official. It's what you're getting through individuals and through what you pick up here and there. it doesn't seem as plausible as it would be if there was a book written about it somewhere. But we're gradually gathering the evidence to put together the same kind of genocide that's going on now with a different face, but the same agenda.
Thank you very much, Reverend Kevin Annett from Canada, who is reaching out to the world to get justice for the 50,000 plus children. Would you call it eugenics?
Definitely eugenics. It's the old agenda of ethnic cleansing, wiping out non-essential Indigenous people who are sitting on the land and the resources that are hungered for by the U.S., by China especially, and multinationals working with them. I should just mention too to people, if they want to read more about this, I talk about that Agenda 21 evidence at my website, hiddennolonger.com.
And the name of your film is Unrepentant?
That you can also see at the same website, hiddennolonger.com. It's a documentary film that actually won the New York Best Documentary at the New York Independent Film Festival in 2006.
Well, the name of it, considering the church that you're addressing, couldn't be more perfect.
Somebody once said the title refers to the church, but also refers to me. 'Cause I'm not.
Strong voice. We do appreciate your words.
Thank you.
This is Reverend Kevin Annett again, and he is going to be addressing ecocide. Please explain.
Well, as we speak, there's a company in Canada, it's the largest uranium company in the world, Cameco, and it's partly owned by the Canadian government, and it's also a multinational. It provides all of the depleted uranium, or a big chunk of it, for the U.S. military. It comes from land occupied historically by the Cree Nation, the Cree people, and many Cree are dying today from cancer because of the uranium mining. There's areas of northern Saskatchewan where you're not even allowed to go because of the uranium mining going on there. It's considered, under military operation. What's going on is, talking to Native people in Saskatchewan, is their relatives have worked up there and they're dying en masse from the uranium tailings from this mining. Now, the same company, Cameco, is working in the Black Hills of South Dakota. They're doing what's called in situ uranium mining, where they dig in a certain way where the remains from this uranium mining leaches into the water table, and so it radiates whole water areas around there. Now, in the Rosebud and Reservation of South Dakota, and near Wounded Knee as well, there has been an enormous increase in death from cancer in the Native population. The white population 10 years ago was encouraged to move away, but the Native population wasn't. And so in the Pine Ridge Reservation, where the Wounded Knee battle broke out in the 1970s with the American Indian Movement, where over 100 AIM members were assassinated by the FBI under the COINTELPRO operation, they're still being killed off, but because of this the uranium leaching into the radiation leaching into the water table, there isn't one Native family on that reservation that isn't suffering from cancer, including the children. And there's good work that's being done by some of the activists there about this, but it shows you that it's not only the continuation of this assault on Native people, but it's aimed specifically at them, knowing they're going to die off en masse from this uranium mining. So I think, we talk about the depleted uranium being used in Iraq and killing the Iraqis and American soldiers.
And deforming their children?
Right. It happens first against the Indigenous people of Saskatchewan and South Dakota. It's the same assault, and they're the first victims in that war. So that's why we say to people, if you want to look for the genocide, you don't have to look 20 or 30 years in the residential schools. 20, 30 years ago, you can look right now. The children of those who were in the Indian boarding schools are still being killed off. And you can read about that at hiddennolonger.com.
Thank you very much.